Hi everyone, this is Free Thinking Through the Fourth Turning. My name is Sasha Stone. It's the Democrats' turn to scare America. No one should be surprised it ended up here. As college protests sprouted like mushrooms in Joe Biden's America, the fanaticism of the left seemed to catch many by surprise. How could it have gotten this bad? How could they seem so crazy? These educated college students. And why isn't Joe Biden doing anything about it? It isn't that it's gotten this bad. It's been this bad for a while. It was just covered up by the mainstream media on the left, who were invested in only one narrative. MAGA supporters are the violent ones, the dangerous ones. Well, what a difference 4 years makes. Now we've seen protesters so violent, not even MSNBC could ignore them. Democrats are scrambling, doing damage control for what looks like a big headache for Joe Biden's embattled re-election bid.
Dozens of universities and colleges across the country continuing to grapple with how to handle the growing movement of pro-Palestinian demonstrators. This morning at UCLA, law enforcement breaching the massive encampment just before dawn.
All right, police and riot gear right now. You hear the flashbangs there, but the police, they are breaching the barrier, trying to make their way into the encampment. The students, though, they are pushing back and trying to hold the line.
Demonstrators, many of them in hard helmets and gas masks, appearing to use fire extinguishers aimed at police trying to fend them off. Police pushing back with overwhelming numbers. California Highway Patrol officers making hundreds of arrests.
We're not going to back down. We have to be forced.
Students demanding divestment from Israel, but also taking their protests beyond the war in Gaza, calling for defunding the police as well, and asking supporters to bring them supplies, including material for shields, umbrellas, and water. Today, the campus left covered in trash and busted tents. The university's iconic Royce Hall defaced with graffiti. Some of those arrested, now released from a downtown jail, speaking out.
How do I feel? I've never felt more proud of myself or my community.
Across the country at Columbia University in New York, the NYPD today releasing portions of body cam video from Tuesday night's raid to clear Hamilton Hall. Police finding protesters sitting on the ground with arms linked.
In the summer of 2020, I knew that whatever had taken hold of the left wasn't likely to go away just because Joe Biden took office. I was worried enough heading into the election that my gut was telling me to vote for Trump, not Biden. I was too afraid then to do much of anything except watch in horror as the last 4 years played out. Put it this way, I'm not surprised that the wheel of oppression spun again and landed on a different group, this time #FreePalestine. It's the same old song. Same old chants, the same old fanaticism, just repackaged to chase the new thing. It was women, then it was the black community, then the transgender community, and now Palestinians. They bowed to Black Lives Matter. Here is a video of students bowing and a moment of silence.
The aiming starts from now.
Now they wear the keffiyeh and bow to pray. The Democrats are in over their heads. They just don't realize it. In the summer of 2020, they might have gone into damage control to help shut down the worst riots that followed the protests, but they didn't. They wanted them to burn as loudly and as long as possible, all to remove Trump from power. As they stated in Time magazine's confessional about the 2020 election, they called it protecting. I call it rigging. For podcast listeners, the headline, The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign That Saved the 2020 Election. Quote, protecting the election would require an effort of unprecedented scale. As 2020 progressed, it stretched to Congress, Silicon Valley, and the nation's state houses. It drew energy from the summer's racial justice protests, many of whose leaders were a key part of the Liberal Alliance. And eventually it reached across the aisle into the world of Trump-skeptical Republicans, appalled by his attacks on democracy, end quote. When I saw the #FreePalestine protests erupt, my first thought was, here we go again. Most of them have the best of intentions. They're not bad kids. They see so much suffering, destruction, and bloodshed, not to mention the daily death toll of children and the looming famine. And they believe what they are doing will help. But they've horseshoed around to taking the point of view of the Arab world that Israel must go. And that we know is never going to happen. It is going to get worse because Israel is determined to go into Rafah, the horrors of which will be immeasurable. Hamas is holding 100 hostages. Would they not have done something by now to make a deal for peace if they cared about their own people? For podcast listeners, a story from the AP, the latest, Israel's planned invasion of Rafah risks killing hundreds of thousands, UN says. But the Democrats are not going to abandon Israel. That means the protests will continue and Joe Biden will take the hit. They're also about to lose one of the strongest cards they had to play, that MAGA was the more dangerous threat, not the left. The longer the protests go on, the less power that narrative will have. They tried to clear the campuses with a show of force, but the damage is probably done. Now America knows which side to fear.
How do the Democrats, how do all of us on that side say January 6th was wrong if you can have the same pictures going on college campuses?
Good Lord, don't make a parallel with January 6th.
You lose the moral high ground.
That has happened, though.
Patty Hearst, or the Manson family. We're watching a similar dynamic play out now that feels like my childhood in the 1970s all over again. The boomers were a coddled generation that felt emboldened to escape the confines of traditional religion and launch a counterculture revolution. While many went on to lead movements and launch careers, others were lost and seeking deeper meaning or spiritual guidance. That would sometimes lead them into the arms of dangerous people. The Symbionese Liberation Army would kidnap Patty Hearst, but it's also been theorized that she was fully involved and not brainwashed. Here's a video of Patty Hearst.
Greetings to the people. This is Tanya. On April 15th, my comrades and I expropriated $10,660.02 from the Sunset branch of the Hibernia Bank. Casualties could have been avoided had the persons involved cooperated with the people's forces and kept out of the way until after our departure. I was positioned so that I could hold customers and bank personnel who were on the floor. My gun was loaded, and at no time did any of my comrades intentionally point their guns at me. Careful examination of the photographs, which were published, clearly shows this is true. Our action of April 15th forced the corporate state to help finance the revolution. As for my ex-fiancé, I don't care if I ever see him again. During the last few months, Stephen has shown himself to be a sexist, ageist pig. Not that this was a sudden change from the way he always was. For those people who still believe that I'm brainwashed or dead, I see no reason to further defend my position. Consciousness is terrifying to the ruling class, and they will do anything to discredit people who have realized that the only alternative to freedom is death, and that the only way we can free ourselves of this fascist dictatorship is by fighting, not with words, but with guns. I am a soldier in the people's army. Patria o muerte, venceremos.
So many lost young women from upper-middle-class families gravitated toward Charles Manson and the Manson family. On Spawn Ranch, they built a kind of utopia. It was all fun and games until Charlie sent some of them up into the Hollywood Hills to commit mass murder. Here is a video of the Manson girls.
In other words, people see that this is the end, that a revolution's coming, or a lot of big changes are coming. And the Jesus people are slipping into the minds of all the people that are confused and don't know where to go.
Do you feel that the end is in sight and a change is coming also?
Big changes are coming real soon.
You're kind of thinking the same way they are then, aren't you?
Well, everyone you meet talks about it. You can, even the little old ladies who sit on the corner who have had their welfare checks taken away, and the little old man and all those people, they all come on this corner every day of the week, yelling about revolution and that, about the people who are in power better give it up. Nixon better give it up, because if he doesn't, the whole thing's going to be destroyed.
Do you feel that you see a limited segment of life as you sit here, that most of the people that come by here are in trouble?
No, you know what, we see, on this corner, we mostly see the people who've been down, for all their lives, because these are the people who are going to court, the black people, the Chicanos. These are the people who spend most of their lives in these courts, with their sons going to, jail, and their daughters going to jail. And we see every kind of way of life there is.
Do you think that you might write a book, chronicle your experience here on the corner?
We have a book already.
Do you?
Oh yeah, it's Charlie's writings, our writings from when we all got together. But
And here is a video of a Free Palestine activist.
I believe Palestinians have a right to equal rights. I believe Palestinians have a right to return to their homelands. Since 75 years ago, Palestinians have been systematically forced out of their homes. And
do you think Israel has a right to exist?
I'm so sorry. I have a longer answer to this question.
Okay, but it didn't. With respect, it didn't sound like you were answering.
I appreciate that you believe that. It's a longer answer because it's a more complicated question.
Go on.
There's a difference between believing that Jewish individuals should be or have a right to be in Palestine, and believing that Israel as a country should be allowed to continue what they're doing. And I believe that the land is Palestine. I believe that.
So you don't believe that Israel should exist? You don't believe the world's only Jewish country should exist?
I want to note that there are Jewish Palestinians. There are Jewish Palestinians, and separatist states usually give other nations an excuse to be biased against Israel, biased against Jewish individuals, because they can say, you have this safe place, we can continue to be biased. And I do not believe that separatist states
What's
work.
A separatist state?
So a separatist state would be saying, here's a Jewish country.
Right, so the United States is clearly a Christian country, isn't it?
But it is not. For starters, I believe that we should be...
So you believe that Christian countries should exist and Muslim countries should exist, but the world's only Jewish country shouldn't exist?
No. There's a difference between a country having a predominant population and a country labeling themselves as a Jewish country. And
the United States clearly identifies itself as a Christian country, as does Britain, as do many other countries. Lots of countries clearly identify themselves as Muslim countries. There is one state in the world that identifies itself as Jewish.
These protests by students on college campuses against Israel aren't so much anti-war protests. This isn't Nixon dropping bombs on Cambodia and the citizens doing everything they can to stop it. This is something that looks more like a cult, more like religious fanaticism. Most people never saw just how crazy it all was. They didn't watch videos like this because to share them would paint one as a racist, just like how they won't spread any news about violence if the perpetrator is black. Here is a video of activists demanding diners lift their fist to pledge their allegiance to Black Lives Matter. It's worth taking a look once again at how we got here. This is my lived experience as a former Clinton, Obama, Clinton, Biden supporter, a helicopter parent, and a woke blogger. I helped build it, and now I must help destroy it. A woke-topia. Electing the nation's first black president ignited a movement on the left. We felt something we'd never felt before. Making history then became everything to us. What I've learned since is that large groups of people need religion. If one isn't there already, they must invent one, and so we did. When I started my business writing about the Oscars in 1999, I soon shifted my focus to writing from the perspective of race and gender. In 2001, Halle Berry had to become the first black actress to win in all of Oscar history. and she did. Kathryn Bigelow had to be the first woman to win Best Picture and Best Director in 2009, and she did. In 2016, Moonlight had to become the first film about a black gay protagonist to win Best Picture, and it did. That was all that mattered to me back then, in the Obama era. I had found what I believed was my true purpose, to make change by boosting minority groups. Just before the 2016 election, I wrote this, quote, "The remaking of America, Miranda's Hamilton, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton. The election of Hillary Clinton is one of the most important battles in the war between two Americas. One America was built and maintained exclusively by and for white men. That demographic has awakened extremists on the left and right. The other America redeems the promise of possibility for everyone, no matter their status or skin color or class." For podcast listeners, a video by Lin-Manuel Miranda campaigning for Hillary Clinton.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 10 things you need to do.
Number 1.
You register to vote and it's on. You post that Hillary sign up on your lawn.
Number 2.
Call some undecideds with your crew. Your cousins in Ohio, maybe try and flip them blue.
Number 3.
Watch Hillary examine the terrain. Watch a campaign with the man Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine in the membrane. Tim Kaine in the brain. Number 4.
Hillary makes each decision, looking at the world from a rarefied position. A public servant with tenacity, agility.
Mi gente, experience is not a liability. 5.
And a Hamilton parody, The Election of 2016.
On your side. It might be nice, it might be nice to get Bernie Bros on your side. Build walls, Trump. Shoot more, Trump. Don't let them enter through the border anymore. Trump. Take a medal from him. Trump. New tweets are on. Trump. It's 2016, ladies. Don't be a slob. Vote for Trump.
I liked Obama.
Well, he can't run again. That's just defeatist.
Hillary Clinton?
Cold as hell.
Yeah, she's so Wall Streetish.
I like that Gary Johnson.
Does that make us libertarian?
It's better than Trump.
What about the Green Party then?
Dear all you Bernie bros, your fellow Democrats would like to know how you'll be voting. Undecided right now. Dear all you Bernie bros, do not waste your vote on someone who's not worth promoting. Never Hillary Clinton or Trump. Clinton or Trump. We always lose. Clinton or Trump. Clinton or Trump.
Trump's win was like the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor to us. We saw it as the beginning of a civil war against white America that rejected the nation's first black president. It wasn't just that Trump said offensive things. It was that he was the embodiment of all our collective hysteria around identity. A white, heterosexual male who said, did, ate, and drove whatever he wanted. He was the very thing we tried to purge. The cult was already there by the time Trump won, but he presented a unique threat, an eternal oppressor, who emboldened so many on the left to take to the streets to protest. In 2017, what happened at Evergreen College should have been a much bigger story. Bret Weinstein and his wife Heather Heying were hunted by woke fanatics that had overtaken the campus, just like the pro-Palestinian protesters did at Columbia and UCLA. Here is a video about Evergreen.
Last month, Evergreen State College in Washington went crazy when a professor of evolutionary biology named Bret Weinstein objected to a day of absence when white students and faculty were asked to voluntarily leave campus. Weinstein branded it a form of racial segregation. A group of student protesters called him a racist. The confrontation incited further protests, debates over free speech, and claims of systemic racism on campus. And things haven't calmed down. Tomorrow, Evergreen will hold its graduation at an off-campus location, 40 miles away.
Would you like to hear the answer or not?
No!
Okay.
This is the video viewed by millions that put Evergreen State and Weinstein in the national spotlight.
This is not a discussion. You have lost that one.
this is not a discussion, you've lost that one.
Yeah, you've lost that one.
So what are they doing here if they don't want to talk to you?
Well, this is part and parcel of their central mode. They're just simply shutting down somebody that they don't want to hear from.
I am not interested in debate. I am interested only in dialectic, which does mean I listen to you and you listen to me.
Weinstein has taught at Evergreen State for 14 years. He describes himself as deeply progressive, but has been denounced as a racist tool of the alt-right by some students and faculty. Weinstein objected to the day of absence in a formal protest email to colleagues, arguing that, quote, one's right to speak or to be must never be based on skin color. Calls for his resignation followed.
By virtue of the way they constructed this, you were making a statement by being on campus that you were not an ally. And I feel like I am an ally to people of color in their attempt to gain equity.
Do you have any sense at this point of why they want you to resign?
Well, they think that I'm a racist. Because if you stand up against one of these things because you think it's ill-considered, that you will be branded as a racist.
We just wanted to be like, until you're accountable for these actions, you don't get to teach students at Evergreen. You don't get to spread this problematic rhetoric and instill it in students.
Yes, you're disrupting my class.
So at this point, we would like Brett to be fired. But that isn't happening. The administration is refusing to take action. They're choosing to protect this white, cis male professor over its students.
Later that day, the students held a raucous meeting at which they presented a list of demands, including the disarming of campus police and mandatory sensitivity training for all faculty. It's the one point on which the protesters and Weinstein agree. Evergreen's embattled president, George Bridges, has mishandled the crisis.
I think their concerns are legitimate. They're articulating ideas that have to do with race, ethnicity, power, privilege, and we're taking a look at them.
That's my problem, George. You keep doing these little hand movements or whatever. Come through.
People were criticizing.
What happened at Evergreen is the template for everything that followed. It showed how students already knew the rules they had written, borrowing them from Marxism and communism. As someone who spent my whole life on the left, all of this was foreign to me, and honestly, nothing I wanted anything to do with. The school administrators buckled, destroyed by their own white guilt, which sent Evergreen into near financial ruin. I began thinking this was just one college in America someone bothered to notice. How many of them were there just like this? In 2020, we found out it was a massive army of like-minded zealots who no longer believed in anything other than justice by mob. Buildings were theirs to destroy. America was a country rooted in colonialism and founded on white supremacy. It was not worth saving.
There were times overnight when Washington was in chaos. There were running battles between protesters and police through the streets. And coursing through the crowd was a seething anger that only built as the evening wore on. Some activists at times pleaded with the police to show restraint.
Why don't you guys stand up against the bad cops?
Kneeling and begging them to see that there is another way than confrontation. What is your message to these police officers?
My message, to treat us like American citizens, to treat us like we matter, to treat us like you're actually here to protect and serve. There's no reason for y'all to pull a gun out on us before actually trying to figure out the situation, to try to understand the situation. I've been shot 9 times so far by rubber bullets. What have I done? I got bum rushed on my knee the same way with my hands up.
This is just playing out just a few meters here from the White House. A row of police officers here trying to keep control. The White House and the president in lockdown. He is barricaded in that building while we've got protesters outside and a row of police officers trying to regain control of the nation's capital. There was vandalism and looting too by a tiny minority. And the police briefly lost control of this area around the White House and were forced to make repeated charges. Several buildings were set alight. For some black activists, such acts of violence are themselves a tragedy.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
For these largely peaceful protests, powerful and eloquent, are in danger of being hijacked by more militant elements.
This destruction is here because a lot of people are upset and they're tired of the police killing black men. But at the same time, if we want the White House to hear us and be seen, we gotta come together and we gotta kneel. We gotta be peaceful. You see all this? No, this is not gonna get the message. They're gonna continue to ignore us because of this.
These street skirmishes lasted for several hours.
The Democrats wanted it to be all about Trump, but what I always knew was coming finally showed up after October 7th. The only question now is how bad is it going to get? Here is a video of a TikToker.
So it's become increasingly obvious the past few weeks that college campuses are no longer conducive environments to higher education, but actually just breeding grounds for chaos and violence. Here's a picture from the UCLA campus yesterday, and I've received thousands of comments over the last few months from parents who say they're rethinking where they're going to send their kids to college. Parents used to aspire to send their kids to Ivy League schools like Harvard or Columbia, but now alumni don't even want to send their kids to those same schools. Imagine you save up for years, you go without, you send your kid off to college to have a better education and a better life than you had, and they start wearing a keffiyeh, sleeping in a tent on the quad, and fomenting violence, and taking advice from these people. I speak from experience because I went to NYU in the heart of New York City and took all of these classes, and there is a ton of indoctrination going on these campuses. You could send your kid off to a fancy college for 4 years, and they would come out on the other side being taught that America, we're just colonizers, we're terrible, we're oppressors, and everything you've known your whole life is a lie. I just have a hard time taking any of these people seriously because the same kids telling me to drive an electric vehicle and use a paper straw left the UCLA campus like this. And this picture really breaks my heart. You have a blue-collar maintenance worker who has to pick up after all of these students and these outside protesters who didn't even go to the school.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Republican pollster Frank Luntz and started by asking him why it had taken Joe Biden until today to speak out about the protests.
I don't know why, and this is significant. And I want to bring it back to 1968, because the campus wars in 68 cost the Democrats the White House. The mess in Chicago at the National Convention, the protests at every Democratic stop, prevented them from benefiting from support among young voters, and it had a consequential impact. Right now, I'm not sure anyone remembers that in today's Democratic Party, but this is significant. If Joe Biden doesn't enter the election with a strong showing from first and second time voters, it'll be hard for him to defeat Donald Trump. And so right now, the White House is very, very scared.
Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. I thought I was so smart, but I knew nothing about this country, because I'd spent the last 20 years living mostly online and inside our virtual utopia. It took me a long time to come out of it. No one wanted to let me go. Even now, they still reach for me to pull me back in. But in 2020, I drove across the country and saw what America was really like. I saw trailers turned into Trump signs. I saw the farms, the churches, the towns, the factories, and the trucks that drove the highways to bring us all our food. I was ashamed of my ignorance, and over time, my entire worldview would change. In the darkest days of 2020, everyone I knew was too afraid to speak about what we were seeing, lest they be called a white supremacist. Editors, writers, teachers, research assistants, and anyone accused of racism could be fired. But there was one person who was not afraid. On July 4th, I gathered with the rest of my liberal friends to watch Trump's speech at Mount Rushmore. We were expecting it to be terrifying, an ominous warning of fascism and bigotry. But that wasn't what I heard. I heard instead the most famous person in the world saying what everyone else was thinking but could not say. Trump said,
"In our schools, our newsrooms, even our corporate boardrooms, there is a new far-left fascism that demands absolute allegiance. If you do not speak its language, perform its rituals, recite its mantras, and follow its commandments, then you will be censored, banished, blacklisted, persecuted and punished. It's not going to happen to us. Make no mistake, this left-wing cultural revolution is designed to overthrow the American Revolution. In so doing, they would destroy the very civilization that rescued billions from poverty, disease, violence, and hunger, and that lifted humanity to new heights of achievement, discovery, and progress. To make this possible.
Of course, the headlines were as expected. It was divisive, dark, and dystopian, they said. But to me, it was honest. The fear of Trump has been imagined the same way the Puritans imagined a devil they could not see. They've only destroyed themselves in trying to destroy him. I never thought that I would like Trump in a million years, much less support or vote for him. But in 2020, whenever I watched a Trump rally, I felt happy. What's that strange feeling, I would wonder? I hadn't felt it in so long. Even now when I watch his rallies, it feels like something better than what we get from any politician on the left who wants to sell us nothing but fear. There is no saving the left. There is only saving the country from them. Here is a statue of George Washington defaced, and sadly, it's hardly the first time in recent years. For podcast listeners, a statue of George Washington at George Washington University with a keffiyeh, a Palestinian flag that says genocidal at the bottom. In the meantime, a handful of very brave college students protected the American flag as it was hoisted back to its rightful place after protesters had put up a Palestinian flag. Someone set up a GoFundMe for the boys to throw them a rager. For podcast listeners, the picture of the boys holding up the flag. In a shocking show of support, they've raised over $500,000, and now that money will go to charity. Here is a video of one of the boys.
When we went in, we said, we will not let the headline of this day be an American flag falls at UNC.
Ongoing protests against the war in Gaza intensified on campus Tuesday. At one point, pro-Palestinian protesters replaced the American flag flying over the quad with a Palestinian one. After university administrators brought a new flag, they tried bringing that one down as well.
My friends and I kind of looked at each other and then said, we should go over there.
Jason Calderon joined several of his fellow students in propping up the flag to prevent it from touching the ground. All while he says he and others were pelted with objects from protesters.
So many Americans in history have fought for the ideals of justice and freedom that flag represents. And who are we if we don't take some water balloons and take some yelling and some chaos to, reap the benefits of what they've sown for American society. So many people are seeing that UNC is a beacon of light.
On campus, steps are being taken to make sure it doesn't happen again.
It was really just inspirational for us to see everybody coming together and the chancellor coming in and saying, as long as I'm chancellor, that flag.
If Trump were the president, these boys would be honored at the White House as proud Americans. But since it's Joe Biden, he'll say nothing, close his eyes, and turn away. Thank you for listening to my podcast, sashastone.substack.com. I'll be on the road for the next month, driving to Ohio to visit my daughter. But I'll be recording from the road and staying in contact with all of you. Hope you have a lovely weekend, and remember, to thine own self be true.
You may be an ambassador, a queen of a queen. You may like to gamble, you might like to dance. You might be the heavyweight champion of the world. You might be a socialite with a long string of pearls, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Oh yeah, you got to serve somebody. Well, it may be the devil, or it may be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Oh yeah.
drugs a joke, a man, women in a cage. You might be a businessman or some high degree thief. They might call you doctor or they might call you chief, but you gotta serve somebody. Yes, you gotta serve somebody. Well, it may be the devil, maybe the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. You may be a preacher with your spiritual pride. You may be a city councilman taking bribes on the side. You may be a barber, know how to cut a hair. Maybe he's on a favor. Somebody there, you gotta serve somebody. Oh yeah, you got to serve somebody. Serve somebody. Well, it may be the devil, maybe the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. Serve somebody. Serve somebody. Serve somebody. Serve somebody. Serve somebody. Get your business ready. Serve somebody. It might be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you gotta serve